I had just married a man who, in many ways, seemed like the perfect companion. Kind, mature, and successful, he had the calmness I craved after years of emotional chaos. He had a grown son from a previous marriage, but I didn't think much of it. I imagined a few polite family dinners, some distant greetings at holidays, and little else. But the day I moved into his house, I was hit with something unexpected. His son would be living with us for the next few weeks while his university was on break. Even more surprising, we'd be sharing a room temporarily, because the other rooms were under renovation. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself it was just a room, just a few nights, and nothing would happen. His son, Liam, was polite and distant, clearly trying to avoid awkwardness. He offered to sleep on the couch, but I insisted he take the bed and I would use the recliner. It felt more proper that way. I thought keeping things clear from the beginning would help. But even from the start, there was something unusual about him. He didn't behave like the young men I'd seen in the past. He wasn't wild or arrogant. Instead, he carried himself with quiet confidence, and his presence lingered in the room even when he wasn't speaking. The first few days passed quietly. We hardly exchanged more than small talk. But the silences grew more comfortable. We'd watch TV at night and occasionally share stories. I found myself laughing with him more than I did with my husband. It felt innocent, just two people trying to make the best of an awkward situation. But I started noticing things. The way he looked at me when I wasn't paying attention. The way his voice softened when he said my name. And the way my heart responded in ways it shouldn't. One night, I woke up from a nightmare and found him still awake, sitting at the edge of the bed scrolling through his phone. Without thinking, I spoke. We talked quietly in the dark about things that had nothing to do with the world outside. Our fears, regrets, what we wished we could change. I told him about my past, how I had married more out of a need for security than love. He listened, not like a stepson, but like someone who genuinely cared. The next day, I tried to ignore the closeness that had crept in. I spent more time out of the room, but my husband was hardly home. He had business trips, meetings always away. Liam and I were left to ourselves. The silence began to speak louder than words. One evening, as we stood in the kitchen together, our hands touched while reaching for glass. It lingered too long. We both felt it, but neither of us said a word. I didn't know it then, but a line had already been crossed. After that night, I couldn't look at Liam the same way. Something had shifted, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I felt it in every shared glance, every pause in conversation. He didn't say anything, but I could sense the tension building beneath the surface. It wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was quiet and slow, like a wave rolling in before it crashes. I started noticing his presence more than usual. When he'd walk into the room, I became suddenly aware of how I was sitting, what I was wearing, how I sounded. I hated myself for that, but I couldn't control it. He wasn't trying to seduce me. He was simply being kind, attentive, present. And that, somehow, was worse. My husband had grown so distant, often tired and detached, like marriage was something he had already checked off his list. But Liam noticed the small things, when I was stressed, when I hadn't eaten, when I seemed off. He brought me tea, without asking. He'd offer to cook dinner if I looked tired.
He remembered the songs I liked.
That attention felt intoxicating. One evening, the power went out during a storm, and we ended up talking by candlelight. It started with casual conversation, but grew deeper, rawer. I shared things I hadn't even told my husband. My dreams that never happened. My fear of being invisible. He listened, not interrupting, just absorbing it all. When he spoke, he told me how hard it had been growing up with his father, emotionally distant, always focused on business, never really there. It felt like we had been holding on to the same kind of loneliness, just from different places. After that, everything became harder to deny. The air between us changed. I found excuses to be around him, and he never resisted. We never touched, not intentionally, but the nearness was enough to make my heart race. I told myself it was harmless, that it was only emotional, but I knew better. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I found a small note tucked into one of my shirts. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. 5 words, written in small, neat handwriting. I wish things were different. My breath caught. I didn't know when he had written it or what he meant exactly, but I knew. It was a confession without admitting anything. A truth hidden in plain sight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying every moment, every glance, every word. I knew I should say something, draw a line, make it stop. But I didn't.
Because part of me didn't want to.
Part of me liked being seen, wanted remembered. I had never imagined I'd feel this way, especially not with someone I was supposed to treat like a son. But emotions don't ask permission. They arrive uninvited and refuse to leave quietly. The next morning, I found Liam sitting outside alone. I had the note in my hand. Without hesitation, I asked him what he meant. He looked at me, defeated, as if he'd been waiting for this moment and dreading it at the same time. He said he knew it was wrong, that he didn't want to hurt anyone, especially his father, but he couldn't pretend anymore. He told me he had feelings for me, real ones, and he hated himself for it. I wanted to be angry, to shut it down, to make it go away, but I couldn't, because I felt the same way. I told him it needed to stop, that nothing could happen between us, that we had to go back to normal. He nodded. We both pretended to agree. But something had cracked open, and no matter how much we tried to patch it up, the damage was done. That day, I avoided him. I stayed in the room, kept to myself, tried to distract my mind with anything else. But by evening, I felt restless, unsettled. When I stepped out, he was there, just sitting quiet. We didn't say anything. I moved past him, but he stood up and gently caught my hand. I froze. Neither of us moved. Then, before I could think, before I could stop myself, I kissed him. It was quick, hesitant, but it happened. And when it ended, we both looked at each other with the same fear. We had crossed a line. We said it couldn't happen again. That it was a mistake.
But it didn't feel like a mistake.
It felt like a secret finally spoken out loud. For the next few days, everything changed. We avoided being alone. The conversation stopped. He barely looked at me. The house felt colder. I thought keeping distance would help, but it only made me more aware of how much I missed him. My husband, oblivious to it all, came home from his trip and complained about work. He didn't notice that I was quiet, or that Liam avoided both of us. He didn't ask why things felt off. Maybe he had stopped noticing a long time ago. A week later, I saw Liam with his bags. He was leaving. He said it was too much, that he couldn't stay there anymore. I tried to reason with him, told him he didn't have to go, but he was set. I reached out to stop him, and in that desperate moment, everything broke loose. We kissed again, more intensely, recklessly. Everything we had held back came crashing out. The guilt, the tension, the longing, it all poured out at once. And then, in that final moment of weakness, we weren't alone. I heard a voice. My husband. He stood there, frozen, watching the very betrayal he never saw coming. He didn't say a word.
He didn't need to.
The silence told me everything. The weight of his silence crushed every part of me. Liam immediately stepped back, his face drained of color. My husband didn't yell or curse. He simply turned around and walked away. That, somehow, felt worse than any explosion. The quiet abandonment, the heartbreak behind his eyes, it shattered me. I didn't follow him right away. I stood there, stunned, trying to understand what I had done and how everything had collapsed so quickly. Liam left that night. He didn't say goodbye. He just vanished, leaving behind an echo of emotions I couldn't erase. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every second was consumed with regret. Not just for what happened, but for how easily I let it happen. The next morning, my husband was gone too. He left a note, short, cold, final. He said he needed time and space, and that he didn't know if forgiveness was even possible. He didn't ask for an explanation.
He didn't accuse me.
He just stepped out of my life the same way he had been stepping out emotionally for years, quietly and completely. The house felt like a ghost town. Every corner reminded me of something I wanted to forget. The empty spaces screamed louder than any words. I tried reaching out to both of them. Liam didn't respond. My husband kept his distance. Days turned into weeks, and I was forced to sit with what I had done. I couldn't blame anyone. Not my husband for being distant. Not Liam for feeling lost. The truth was, I had chosen every moment that led to this. I let the line blur, let my loneliness speak louder than my morals. Eventually, I moved out of the house. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. I found a small apartment, started fresh. People around me didn't know what happened. They just saw a woman who looked a little more tired, a little more aged. I carried the story silently. I didn't tell anyone. It wasn't something to be confessed. It was something to be lived with. Months later, I got a message. It was from Liam. Just a few lines. He said he was sorry for everything, that he hoped I was okay, and that he had started therapy to understand himself better. He didn't ask to see me. He didn't hint at wanting anything. It was just closure. Or maybe an attempt at it. I cried after reading it. Not because I missed him, but because I finally realized how broken we both were when we found each other. It wasn't love. It was two people clinging to the warmth of a moment because they were drowning in their own cold. As for my husband, he never came back. We eventually signed the papers. No confrontation. Just a legal ending to an emotional disaster. I don't blame him. He deserved more than what I gave him. Sometimes I wonder how different it all could have been. But life doesn't let you rewind. It only lets you learn. And I learned that betrayal doesn't always come from hate. It often comes from the quiet places where love was never loud enough to be heard.